Fantastic. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's tuning in all throughout the country. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend the time with us learning about Microsoft Teams. Kind of what is it, what's new with Microsoft Teams, and where is it going? Um, Today we have a packed full agenda of lots of items to discuss with you all around Microsoft Teams. Before we dive in, I'd like to introduce our presenters today. We have, my name is Taylor Wells. I'm with NW Techs. We are a IT advisory firm, and we basically help small organizations manage their entire IT environment. So Microsoft 365, Teams, things like that is just kind of one of the small and large pieces of the puzzle that we help our clients with. We also help them with cybersecurity, phone systems, and alleviating other IT dysfunction and increasing business productivity. I'm also joined today by one of our great partners, Pax8, and Joseph Baubert, who is a specialist with Pax8. Thanks so much for being with me today, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely, Taylor. Thanks for the introduction there. As he was saying, we work closely with Northwest, just providing education, everything like that, anything we can do to help get that information out to you guys as the end users. So really looking forward to demo Teams with you today and answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Joe. Yes, one little thing he just mentioned is that we're going to be doing a live demo towards the end of the webinar. So be sure to stay tuned for that, because that'll be really cool for you guys to be able to see kind of under the hood and seeing how other organizations utilize it. Also, what Joe mentioned, we really heavily rely on vendors like Pax8 because, as you know, there's a lot of aspects of technology. And as we function as our client's IT department, we need partners like them to come in to help us with specific things like Microsoft 365. Be awesome. Before I jump into the agenda and dive right into the presentation, I want to kind of go through a couple housekeeping items today. This webinar will be recorded, so if you'd like to share it with anybody in your organization or somebody that might be interest to you, we will be sending out a recording in the next couple days. We also will be doing a live Q&A throughout the event as well. A lot of you submitted, we had probably about 75 questions that were submitted in the registration at least. That was super helpful for us to create this presentation. So we took a lot of the questions that you guys already submitted and kind of helped formulate this presentation to customize it to your guys' specific needs. That being said, if something comes up throughout the webinar, please feel free to send your questions in. If you see the little chat box in your window, you're more than welcome to click on the chat box. You can send a message to the panelist, which is Joseph and I, or you can send to the entire audience as well. So feel free to send in your questions if something comes up throughout the event, and we'll be sure to try to answer all of those. Fantastic. Without further ado, I'm going to jump right into the agenda. We have a packed full agenda, like I mentioned today. We'll be covering a lot of different topics and a lot of different subjects. Like I already mentioned, we'll be doing a live Q&A throughout the event, so be sure to submit those questions as they come up. Then we'll be jumping right into Microsoft. What is Microsoft Teams? Kind of talking about what is it? These collaboration platforms are new and are over the past 5 to 10 years have definitely skyrocketed in use. And so why is that? Why did Microsoft Teams get created? We'll go right into the benefits and outcomes of Teams. So looking at how historically Teams has been out for a couple years now, looking at some data of, hey, what are some outcomes if your organization implements Teams correctly? And then we'll jump right into, beyond that, how does Teams compare to other solutions? Right now, we're actually using Zoom webinar. And so you might be asking, why aren't we on Teams right now? It's a great question, and we'll be sure to answer that halfway through the presentation here. Next, we'll be going into best practices, and then we will be talking about advanced features, kind of some features that we've actually done Microsoft Teams webinars before, and some of the best practices that came up. People are like, oh, wow, I never knew you could do that with Teams. We'll be covering a couple of those best practices. And then we'll be talking about what's new and up and coming. So last week, Microsoft released that they're rolling out the TogetherMode, which I'm sure a lot of you guys saw that. And in some of our marketing of this webinar, we mentioned TogetherMode and other things like they're going to be expanding their business voice PBX features. And then they're also going to be doing expanding their just their video chat functionality in general. So we'll be talking about that then. And then towards the end, like I mentioned, we'll be doing a live demo. So I'll turn it over to Joseph, and he'll be kind of taking you through some of the nuts and bolts of Teams. And then lastly, and I'll mention this a couple times throughout the webinar, how can you guys get more help with Teams ongoing? And without further ado, I'll kind of touch that. If you already know you need help with Microsoft Teams or Microsoft 365 in general, the first question I would ask is, do you have a Microsoft Reseller representative? This is a free program that you can go through many IT advisors like our firm. And essentially what it gives you is the ability to get an advisor to help you purchase which licenses you need to make sure you have the right license of Teams. This does not get you a whole lot of troubleshooting or the ability to fix things when stuff like that comes up. We can definitely point you in the right direction. That would be more of your IT department. And if you need an IT department, we can definitely talk to you about that. However, this is kind of the best place for you to get started. We'll be talking about this more through the webinar. If you already know you need help, feel free to go over to nwtex.com/Microsoft Reseller. There's a form and some information on there for you guys to fill out. If you already know, hey, I need more help already, I know that. So feel free to jump into that. Great. Our first topic today is, what is Microsoft Teams? Microsoft Teams was built out of the need for organizations to collaborate digitally and really collaborate internally more effectively. I'll be talking about how Microsoft differentiates themselves. Microsoft Teams differentiates themselves in particular from other platforms like Slack and Zoom and Google Hangouts. But ultimately, it's a robust system to integrate and collaborate, internally. One thing I've seen is, if you're a smaller organization, you may communicate a lot over text, right? And you may send an employee or your partner or a vendor a text. And what we found is that instant communication, that need to have an instant communication, that's not a phone call. You don't want to be as disruptive as a phone call, or maybe they're in a meeting, so you can't disrupt them. But it's not as long as an email, or it doesn't have the duration of the email. Especially, emails tend to be, hey, it may not be urgent, but get back with me in the next couple of days, or when you can, or when you're out of the meeting. So Teams has been a platform, and Slack and other platforms as well have come out of this need for just being able to have instant communication within your team, where and you don't want to do it on text because you can't have a track record of it. Text messages are also very personal, generally speaking, and mixing the work and personal life can be dicey. And so it kind of came out of that desire for having a platform you can have instant communication within your team. And it's not a phone call, it's not an email, it's more like a text message, but you don't want to use text message because you don't have the ability to track it. You don't have the ability to easily bring in other team members into the conversation. And so the idea for being able to collaborate quickly, and then it just kind of grew from there. And so now, as you can even see in this window, there is quite a few features like you can chat, you can have different groups to communicate with in those teams. Microsoft Teams has the ability to make phone calls, and then you also have the ability to hold meetings, events, video communication, all sorts of different stuff. And then integrating third-party applications like project managers, or all sorts of different things. File sharing, that's a big area. We'll be talking a little bit about how you can integrate some of your file sharing as well into this platform. So it kind of grew out of that ability to have just a robust way to instantly communicate with people quickly and get people's feedback without being super disruptive. Some of the other features of Teams and what is Teams is they have, and I'm not going to read through all of these, but these are kind of the high level overviews of each one of the sections. So you can chat. That's kind of what I was mentioning earlier, as far as being able to instantly communicate with another team member in your organization, and then also be able to communicate within teams as well. So just like you can have 5 or 10 people on a chat group, which I don't know about you guys, but the group text messages are pretty overwhelming when you have multiple people from different devices. So a great example of how text messaging doesn't really work super well, especially with iPhone and Android users, and why having a place to communicate, a place to chat within your team digitally is super important. Then you can also obviously make it fun, add different things like stickers and emojis, and then you can also do group and in one-on-one communication. The meet from anywhere is also super valuable. I think that's probably from our organization. We use Teams, and we love it. We use it, are using it more and more every day. And one of the biggest things is holding meetings and quickly being able to have meetings within our team, whether it's video conference, collaborating on different documents, screen sharing, all that fun stuff quickly right within Teams. And then it also has the ability to do events and stuff like that, where you can actually host larger events, whether it's in your organization, and so on and so forth. Teams also has a call from anywhere feature where you can call. So one thing we're doing a lot and we're implementing with our clients is eliminating a lot of, so we have a phone system, right? Just like most of your organizations do as well. It's a traditional VoIP phone system where robust call routing and an auto attendant and extensions and all that fun stuff, which is super helpful, especially for communicating with our clients, right? We do a lot of tech support, so being able to route people and have call queues and after hours emergency lines, things like that, where people can get the help they need on or the tech support they need, is super important. Microsoft Teams has something similar to that, and for internal use, where you can make calls. And how we're utilizing it is we still have our standalone PBX VoIP phone system that we use for if you call our 800 number or call our local number, you can, there's an auto attendant, you can call different extensions or get support and stuff like that, and have more of that professional out-facing feature. But for internal calls, we're using Teams a ton for internal calls, mostly because it's easier to, if you're already chatting with a team member about an issue, you can just click call them or video chat them, and you're able to communicate with them. Honestly, and Joseph's going to talk a little bit about this later, and we'll talk about this more throughout the webinar, Microsoft Teams phone system in general is really not up to snuff when it comes to having that professional outward-facing phone system. And really what I mean by that is like PBX features. So things like having an auto attendant and having a robust call queue where, hey, I want to ring this group of people first, and so on and so forth. So we still implement and use our own phone system, and for our clients as well, we still recommend a specific phone system. And then ultimately, but for internal calls, right? So if you just want to call a team member, so on and so forth, as you're probably getting and realizing, Teams is really great for internal collaboration. I'll mention that a little bit later too when we talk about the other platforms and how they compare. But really, Teams is fantastic for internal communication. I'm sure, and they have some abilities to bring in outside people, but unless those outside external, whether they're clients or vendors, unless they have Teams already, it's really hard to kind of get them into the meeting, if you would. So a lot of this communication, once again, is really designed for internal communication. So whether it's chatting or meeting or calls, internal communication, think that, and it's really good for that. We're seeing that we're not having to use our traditional phone system for internal communication, because it can all kind of just live in Teams. And that way you can track it, you can have a history of it, it makes it more fluid, so on and so forth. And last but not least, this is probably one of my favorites, the ability to collaborate. So whether it's other Microsoft 365 tools like OneDrive and SharePoint, the ability to collaborate easily on documents and share documents easily within teams is pretty cool. And it ultimately, especially if you are a Microsoft 365 user and you're using the full suite, Teams is an awesome hub to do all that and to collaborate. They're only getting better with integrating, and I'll talk about this a little bit later as well, integrating with other file sharing tools like Dropbox and Drive and Box, excuse me, and other file sharing platforms that you may already be using. And so they do have an ability to integrate those, and then they also have a robust app ecosystem that you can tap into to integrate all sorts of different project managers and so on and so forth, depending on what tools you use. Fantastic. Another thing is kind of what is Microsoft Teams and where it's going. This is an excerpt from an article that was released by Microsoft. I'm just going to kind of highlight the bolded area here. Satya is the CEO of Microsoft, released this in April or early May. And this was just at the start of COVID and working remotely. But what they saw was they've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. And really what that means is Teams has skyrocketed for the use of it, primarily being that so many organizations are working remotely. And then, so that's done 2 things. First, it's not only given Microsoft resources to add more features, which we'll talk about more later, and which if you are a Microsoft Teams user, you've seen that over the past couple months, the different features that they've added on. But it's also kind of just some interesting fact to show with the industry in general that because of it's kind of forced, they had 2 years of projections of how the app was going to grow, and they did it in 2 months, which is pretty fantastic when it comes to the ability for new features to come out, and then also for adaption. So the more people use it, the more they're going to be able to see what works, what doesn't work, especially in the very strange world we're living in regards to COVID and so many people working remotely. There's Microsoft, as we'll kind of show you later on as well, they're learning a lot, and there's a lot of things that they're trying to adapt to as so many of our organizations are working remotely, and trying to mitigate some of the negative aspects of working remotely, because I'm sure as your organization's experience, there's a lot of positives and the ability to be focused and not have to travel and things like that. But ultimately, there's also a lot of negatives of not having the in-person emotional connection and being all in the same room with people. So they're working really hard to eliminate that, and continued usage of their platform has only helped with that. Kind of switching over to some of the benefits of Teams. So this is some data they pulled from the past couple years of usage. So this is even before COVID, before the increased remote workforce. These are some of the numbers that they surveyed a couple thousand of their random customers, and they pulled in kind of some of these high level outcomes and benefits of using Teams. And so I'm sharing this with you all, and we're sharing this with you is because we want to kind of show you kind of what should you be looking for when you're implementing Teams. What are some of the things that have been super helpful? So one is collaboration. So how many hours a week are they saving on collaboration and sharing information? So if you're not using Teams to share information quickly, that is something you should be looking at. If it is only strictly for maybe holding meetings, that's great for collaborating, but how are you sharing information back and forth, whether that's collaborating on a document, so on and so forth. Decision makers' ability to make decisions have increased. Trips, that's another large area as well. How many trips are you making, right? And by year 3 of implementing Teams, they had 150 trips, overnight trips that were replaced with online meetings. So I think even, look at a year down the road or a couple years down the road, a lot of our organizations, especially the clients we serve, they will go back to, and even our organization will go back to, Lord willing, go back to the ability to work more in person. However, think about how teams can eliminate some of those meetings. That way, when you are together, you're super focused on maybe the team building aspect or mission critical type projects, and instead of it being more water cooler conversations where you could have over Teams or just have a quickly done meeting there. If you guys do have a question, I know some people are raising hands, feel free to send the questions via chat, and you're more than welcome. We'll try to answer those questions throughout the webinar. Just as a reminder, there's a little chat button in your window kind of at the very bottom. If you click on that, you can select sending a message to the panelists, which is just Joe and I, and that will be private, or you can send a message to the entire group as well. A couple other things here too, you guys can read your own. These are of just reduction in meetings in general, and then other things like saving times in meetings, and then having, I really like the one right here, which is 80% of survey respondents felt like having all of our solutions in one place saves time. So that's kind of going back to, hey, maybe stop having your phone calls in your traditional PBX, stop sending text messages, reduce your emails internally and have those conversations over Teams. That's one thing we've noticed a lot too, is there's still a place for emails internally. And we found that emails are, especially for non-time sensitive related matters, super important. However, moving all of your communication to one place can increase efficiency and so on and so forth. Fantastic. We're going to switch over to how does Teams compare to other solutions? So some of the questions we got were, hey, how does Teams compare to Slack or Zoom or Google Hangouts? And so I'd love to kind of talk through those a little bit. First thing is Teams, how does it compare to Slack? So if any of you use Slack, it's a kind of a standalone collaboration product. It was really one of its first in kind of being such a industry standard for being such a robust system. And actually, we as our organization and many of our clients use Slack. I guess we switched over to Teams about a year ago, and I'll talk about why we did that. But Slack is awesome. Slack is a great platform for communicating and doing a lot of the things we've talked about. However, if you are a Microsoft 365 user, Slack doesn't really have, it doesn't have the benefits of having everything, your entire ecosystem in Teams. So a year ago, we switched over since we originally were actually, to give you a little behind the scenes, we were actually a G Suite Gmail organization, and we use Slack in conjunction with that. And then about a year ago, we realized, Microsoft 365 has only gotten better, especially online, Microsoft 365 online, and the whole world of having things cloud-based, that we realized, hey, the benefits of being tapping into that ecosystem were super great for our organization. And then we saw Teams increase as a platform too last year. We saw it getting a lot more robust and having a lot of the same features as Slack. So about a year ago, we migrated our entire organization over to Microsoft 365 using Outlook, SharePoint for our file sharing, and then Teams. And then we've done a lot for our clients as well, especially as the 365 ecosystem has gotten better. We've slowly recommended and migrated a lot of our clients away from Google products, Slack. They're great. I still love Gmail. I think it's probably one of the best email platforms ever created. However, if you're looking at your technology from a holistic standpoint and looking at all of the different features, the ecosystem, especially if you're a business, and especially if you're a business maybe in a highly compliant regulatory organization or environment, such as lawyers, CPAs, the medical industry, marketing firms as well. It's another organization that have a lot of compliance these days because of cybersecurity and things like that. We found that Microsoft really just has some of the best-in-class technology and security that we can implement for ourselves and our clients. So we migrated over. Like I said, Slack is great. We love it. But if you are a 365 user, Microsoft Teams is a awesome alternative, and then to Slack, and it has all the benefits of tapping into the rest of the ecosystem, like like simple things, which I have a slide later on, of integrating your calendar. Having that in Teams is super cool, and being able to have your Outlook calendar right in Teams and having that collaborate super well, and starting meetings and stuff like that. Next question would be, how does Microsoft Teams compare to Zoom? So Zoom is another platform that skyrocketed since COVID, and since the increase in remote workers. Zoom is a great platform as well. We're using it right now. And honestly, from external communication, so if we're communicating with our clients, if we're communicating, doing live events with external events, Zoom, we have found, is just one of the is just the most robust and stable of the platforms. Teams, maybe one day we'll have the ability to have more external facing meetings, have more the ability to have collaborate with your clients, which would be super cool, right? Be able to have your clients come into a meeting, or your vendors come into a meeting and collaborate on documents. You can do that. It's just not as slick and as seamless as Zoom right now. And the ability to host robust large meetings externally is just not there yet. So another question would be, how does it compare to Google Hangouts? And this kind of ties in with the same question of using the Microsoft 365 platform versus using Google. Hangouts has also increased in its popularity and in its functionality. Google's done a really good job of adding more features. And if you're a Google Drive and Gmail platform, G Suite, Hangouts is actually a pretty good video communication. I would honestly compare Google Hangouts more to Zoom than it is to Slack. So Slack is kind of like its own thing, and Teams tried to mimic it in a lot of ways and try to become a similar platform as Slack. Zoom and Google Hangouts, from what I've seen and what we've seen, have been very good for external communication, and internal communication to an extent. But that ability to collaborate and that ability to have robust groups to share ideas, to collaborate on different documents, Google Hangouts leaves something to be desired. So I would say, once again, Google Hangouts is a great external communication platform, but it doesn't really have the tools that Slack and Teams have in regards to that internal collaboration, which is its own category, really, because Teams and Slack are ultimately doing something new. They're trying to replace a lot of those instant communication, which Google Hangouts and Zoom don't really have the platform yet to do that. They're more for holding meetings and doing video chat, video calls, things like that. Fantastic. Our next topic is going to be around advanced features. So this is some pretty fun stuff that I love to talk about, and these are things that we brought up from some questions you guys all had, and then also from our previous webinars, looking at what are some features that people are needing or using a lot. One of the main ones being, one of the coolest ones I think is, so I'll give you a scenario. Let's say you reach out to one of your team members or reach out to your business partner. You're having a conversation with them. It's an in-depth conversation, right? So you've been chatting for a couple weeks on this topic, or maybe the team has been chatting for a couple weeks on this topic, and you're sharing documents, and there's decisions made, and there's a whole history of communication. So similar to an email where you can see a thread of communication, but unlike an email, it's kind of hard to customize or have the ability to filter out certain information or a certain amount of days and stuff like that. I mean, you can forward, an email chain, but you don't have necessarily a whole lot of control over it. So one cool feature in the Teams and chat function is the ability to have that entire conversation and then add somebody to the conversation, but then not just add them to it, dictate how you can, how much information they receive. So you can say, hey, I want them to include, I don't want any history, right? So I'm going to add this person to the conversation and I want it to be all fresh, right? So maybe my business partner and I made a bunch of decisions and I want to add this other person into the conversation. The ability for them to add them without showing any of that previous history, you can do that. And then just start the conversation, continue the conversation. Or you can add all the history, right? You can say, hey, I want them to see everything. I want them to see all the decisions that were made, all the collaboration that was made, so they can review it and get up to speed on the decisions that were made. And then the last is, which I like the best, is you can show a certain amount of days. So for example, let's say it is a conversation you've been having for a couple of weeks with a team member or your business partner. You can say, hey, I want them to see the last 2 days because everything else might have been private, right? Maybe everything else you made decisions that were above their pay grade, for lack of a better expression. And you only want them to see a few of the dates that were, or the last few dates that were most decisions were made, and then to get them up to speed. That's a pretty cool feature that I love and use often, is the ability to kind of filter out as you're having a conversation with somebody. You can share the history with a new attendee, and then you can dictate how much that history is. Very similar to forwarding an email, but you just have more control over it. And of course, email is email, and this is in the Teams environment and in a completely different space. Next feature I'd love to talk about, and I think we got a question here, that was around scheduling meetings in Teams. So this feature addresses that idea. And so within Teams, this is actually a screenshot. Both of these screenshots were of my environment. And this shows the ability to, in here, you can actually, in your calendar, which syncs with your Outlook calendar, you can schedule a meeting. And the scheduling the meeting will automatically create a Teams meeting, which is pretty cool, right? So you can schedule a meeting, be like, hey, I want to meet with everyone this afternoon. Schedule the meeting right in here, add everyone on the team, send it out, and then people can log in right there. I honestly use my calendar in Teams a lot more now than I use my Outlook calendar, just because I'm in Teams all the time. It gives me all the alerts that Outlook would give me. And since I'm already in there, it's more fluid. I don't have to jump back and forth. And the ability to, instead of having your email, Teams, and a calendar, I can now just have my email and Teams, which hosts my calendar, and then all the other internal communication. So in here, like I mentioned before, you can easily create a meeting in Teams that is a Teams meeting. You also have the ability to create a non-Teams meeting as well. So let's say it's an on-site meeting, or it's a live event, or things like that. You can do, you can work with your calendar and send out invites in there as well. So the seamless ability to manage your calendar in here is pretty great, and eliminating your need to have your calendar open as well. You can kind of just function your entire calendar in Teams. Fantastic. Moving right along. I mentioned this earlier in the webinar in regards to cloud storage. So depending on what cloud storage you're using, you can integrate it and collaborate with varying degrees depending on the integration within Teams. So one easy one, and this is the most seamless, is integrating OneDrive. So if you're a OneDrive user, you can easily integrate your OneDrive and then search files, easily share them, easily open them up within Teams and collaborate one-on-one. And then if you are using other platforms like Dropbox or Box or ShareFile, and Google Drive, solutions like that, you can also integrate those, pull them in. They all have nuances and varying degrees of usability. I will say OneDrive is the most seamless for its ability to integrate within Teams. We use SharePoint as our file storage, and we are still still working at the kinks and looking at ways to integrate that better with Teams. Even though SharePoint is a product, of Microsoft in the 365 ecosystem. It doesn't have as much fluidity and usability as OneDrive. So we definitely recommend if you just want to use the most easy and usable tool would be OneDrive, and storing your files in there and being able to collaborate on those, easily collaborate with those documents in Teams. Definitely recommend using OneDrive, but then you can also go in here and integrate the rest. Definitely reach out to your IT department or your IT advisor to help you navigate that. Definitely, there's a lot of options there. They're only getting better at getting those to collaborate. Ultimately, long term though, what we've seen is the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, and why we've moved to it internally and pushed a lot of our clients there, is the ability to have everything in one place. And so long term, whether it's SharePoint or OneDrive, we're recommending those two file storage solutions just for its seamless ability to collaborate, whether you're in Teams or not. If you send a document over email, or the ability to collaborate just online in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem is pretty awesome. SharePoint is one of our favorites just for a couple reasons. Just as a side note, we love SharePoint because of the security features. It has a lot more options for having security in place and having functionality in regards to who has access to what files and when. So once again, if you're in a highly regulated environment, CPAs, law firms, marketing agencies, the medical industry, being able to lock your documents, being able to have privacy and have have the login expire and things like that is required of a lot of those industries. And so SharePoint does a great job of that. And ultimately you can still collaborate super well in SharePoint, just like you can in OneDrive. Awesome. I mentioned this at the beginning of the webinar, but if you were we're going through all these features, like, oh man, this is a lot of awesome stuff, but we need more help. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, kind of the first step is for you guys to get a Microsoft Reseller representative. If you don't already have one, we'd be happy to look at us becoming your reseller. It's a free program. It doesn't cost you anything. And essentially what it gets you is the ability to have an advisor like us help you identify which licenses you need, which ones you should purchase, and then help you not overpay. Because I'll show a slide later on just the complexity of how many different licenses Microsoft has. We love Microsoft, but they don't make things simple. Let's be honest, they overly complex a lot of things because they're trying to serve a huge audience and they're trying to serve a lot of people, and we get that. But ultimately, it's unfortunate that it is a little bit hard to understand. Hey, do I get E3 or an E4 or E5 license? And then there's also a free version of Teams, right? So you may be using a free version if you don't have some of those licenses. And a lot of the new features, which I'm about to talk about, are all required an E3 or more license and the ability to have a business 365 license, not some of the free licenses that are out there. So if you need more help, head over to nwtex.com/Microsoft Reseller. If you already have a reseller, reach out to them and they can point you in the right direction. If you need help beyond that, we'll talk about that at the end of the webinar of like, hey, I need help just training our organization. Hey, I want to know more about file sharing and how I can get all our files in the cloud. Maybe your organization is still using an on-premise server for your file storage, and the ability to get all your stuff into the cloud, not only to have more robust file sharing, but then to kind of connect it with Teams and have the ability to have everything in one place is pretty cool. And we've been doing that a lot for our clients, and Microsoft is only getting better at eliminating the need to have really anything hosted on your local computer. If you're collaborating on documents, Microsoft documents on your local computer, the online environment's only gotten so much better. And so the ability to use SharePoint or OneDrive or both has been super awesome, and ultimately eliminating the need for servers and whatnot. But anywho, the first step would be to get a reseller. Once we get that started with you, we can help you get started identifying what those problems are. And if you need additional help, we have IT services, cybersecurity services that can help you with those things. Awesome. Now for some more fun stuff. So we're going to switch over to the what's new and up and coming. So Microsoft has announced over the past couple of weeks, I guess about a month now, a bunch of new features that are coming to Teams. Last Wednesday, I believe it was the 22nd, Microsoft came out with announcement that they're rolling out TogetherMode, and they're also rolling out what you see on your window right now, which is the large gallery view. So if any of you are Microsoft Teams users, you've probably noticed that when you have more than 8 people on a video chat, you can't see them all in one window, which is, Zoom and other platforms have been doing that for a while. So I'm sure you've been frustrated being like, hey, I want to see everyone on one window. I want to see my whole team in one window. So Teams is rolling that feature out. So if you have a meeting more than 10 people, you'll be able to see them up to 49 people on one window. Honestly, I don't know if I could handle seeing any more than 49 people on one window. So I think that's a good cap. And then, so this feature is pretty cool. The ability to have multiple people on one screen, very similar to Zoom and other video conferencing tools. Now you'll be able to do this with your team. These features are being rolled out slowly. Joseph and I were talking before this call that, I asked him, hey, has your organization got this feature yet? We know our organization hasn't received it yet. And it seems very random who's getting it. Microsoft is moving super quickly on a lot of these features just because of the need and the demand for them. And so I think they're rolling them out in stages across the, but we imagine over the next couple of weeks, these features will be available to all of us, and we'll have the ability to have some of these pretty cool features. A side note, this is not available for the free version. So if you are using Teams for Family or other versions, some of the free versions, this is not available for that. This is only for E3 licenses and the business licenses. Awesome. The next feature is TogetherMode. TogetherMode is one of the most interesting features that have come out or is coming out from Microsoft. And this platform, this feature is designed, they did a bunch of study on video fatigue. And I'm sure you've all realized this. I know right when COVID happened and a lot of our organizations went remote, we're doing family gatherings on video chat. We're doing, local community groups on video chat. We're video chatting with our friends. We're video chatting with our teams. And it was overwhelming. And honestly, what we found is that you don't have things like the relational capital that you have in person. You don't have a lot of the communication is so nonverbal that you miss out on some of that and having some of that fluidity of in-person meetings. They're great, but they're ultimately, you can't substitute for in-person completely. And so basically, how can there be a hybrid and how can they bridge the gap? So what you're viewing right here is a lecture mode, it's a Together mode, but in a lecture environment, in a kind of a school environment. This might kind of seem a little overwhelming, and honestly, this is a good picture, but it is a little overwhelming with having so many people so grouped together. But the idea behind it all is, hey, let's eliminate people's backgrounds, let's eliminate a lot of the distractions, and then kind of centralize people, right? So just like in person, you're not looking all around, all these different windows and swiping through to different screens to see everyone, to get people's feedback and reaction. The idea is to centralize all the communication into one area. And so this you can have different modes. This one is the lecture hall mode. So if you're a professor or if you're in education, the idea is, hey, get all your students kind of all in one area. And then that way you can see everyone. And then as you can see, everyone that's in your meeting can do the same thing. So you have the presenter who's on one screen, and then they can see, kind of their coworkers or their classmates. One feature here is the ability to also have conference room feature as well. So they have the ability to have like a board meeting room or a conference room where you can have everyone sit around the conference table, which I thought was pretty cool. And then the other one is a coffee shop is another feature they're going to have, is where it will kind of put everyone around the coffee shop table and try to replicate some of that coffee shop experience. Once again, it's not going to replace in person. However, we do see tools like this being super helpful in just making video communication more fluid, making your teams and internal communication more fluid, and trying to connect people a little bit more. Some of the studies, a fun fact, some of the research that Microsoft did is when you're looking at somebody on the screen, your brain actually doesn't know if it's a real person or not. Your brain knows it's a real person. So that's actually part of the reason why video chat is so fatiguing, is because you know they're all real people and you're trying to stay connected. So if we can bridge the gap, and Microsoft is going to be releasing this feature and is rolling out this feature to kind of bridge that gap and make it so it is actually more like you're in the same room with somebody, because your brain knows your brain knows it's a real person on the other end. And so just helping your brain out and making it so it's not so fatiguing. Awesome. At this point, one other feature that's coming out is Microsoft Business Voice. So I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that Microsoft has a phone system that you can integrate, and the ability to make phone calls, not just internally, right, to other team members, but also externally. So you can make phone calls, and they have the ability to make phone calls, and eventually their end goal is to replace your traditional phone system. So that way you can receive all of your external calls and internal calls all through Teams. Honestly, what we've experienced in testing it out, we've had some of our engineers test it out, is that it really doesn't replace, it doesn't have the features, the full professional features of a PBX and having of a traditional phone system. So call routing, having an auto attendant that says, hey, thanks for calling, press 1 for this, press 1 for that, or 2 for that. It doesn't have those features. And so what we recommend is using Teams for internal calls, but still using your standalone phone system, whether it's a VoIP phone system. And if you need help with that, we also do phone system as well. So happy to navigate and help you utilize both of those tools. But they are coming out with more features on that. And excited to see what they're going to come out with, because ultimately it would be great if you could have all your phone calls come through Teams, not just your internal calls, but also your external calls. So without further ado, I'm going to be passing it over to Joseph to go through a live demo and kind of go under the hood for a few minutes and kind of show us what Teams looks like.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Taylor. Can everybody see my screen okay? Perfect. So right here, we're just going to be inside the Teams application. So I'll start out here on the left-hand side. As we touched on these features before, this is going to be your basics. It's your activity feed. Anything that's going on, anything that you've been mentioned in, any unread messages will show up in this area. You can always filter that to go by your day. So say you want to start your day out by going through your unread messages or your missed phone calls from internal users. You can go through it that way. From there, you dive into the chat function. So this is one-on-one chats with the ability to add in more people as needed, as Taylor was saying earlier. It's really cool because you can collaborate on documents within that one-on-one feature. Say you're talking to somebody you're not quite familiar with inside the organization, you can simply hover over their name right here. You can go into the message chat. You can email them directly from here. But then you can also view them on the organization chart, which is something new that Microsoft had inside of here. That way, if you are talking to somebody and they're out of office and you need an answer right away, you can go to either manager or somebody in that same position, get that answer right away. Inside the team section, this is going to be where the majority of the collaboration is going to happen. So you're going to be a part of different teams here. And you can filter them out by channels. You can add channels, add members if you do have those rights inside of there. But what's nice inside the chat feature here is you can mention anybody you want. So if we do need to talk to Adele, we can get her inside of that conversation. So inside of here, this is pretty cool. You can notice that Lee did post something in Mandarin. If you wanted to, you can get that translated. So then you can actually reply to that. With that as well, you can do the immersive reader option. The immersive reader will then pull this up and you'll be able to sound out the words in case you need something like that. Calendar option, as we went over in the PowerPoint. Again, going to be integrating with Outlook, going to be able to schedule calls as well as enter them in from there. This is going to be the calling feature, so anything internally, you'll notice that I'll have a voicemail here from Alex. Alex did just give me a call, and then we also do see our suggested calls, so people that you're contacting recently are going to show up right there. Again, files, can either be from your OneDrive, so anything inside of here that you do want to share out, you will have the abilities there. So those are going to be the basic features. What I want to take a look at a little bit more is all the applications and stuff that you can actually put into Teams. So a huge list, depending on what your business needs and wants are. You can do just about anything, even if you want to add in a weather app. Down here on the help icon, definitely a great area to go. So the training is huge. It's going to have short little bite-sized videos, easy to go through, easy to learn up on if you are curious about certain features of Teams. Also inside of there, going over all those new features, this is going to have everything new. That way you'll be able to stay up to date on all the awesome features that they're adding into Teams. Up here on the search bar, this is going to be one of the best features, in my opinion, is the find button. So say you want to find something and it's within the go-to market plan and you want to find something that said the word project. Let's try a different one. And my web browser might have froze there. Let's try that again. Let's try plan. That'll come up inside of that Teams of whatever conversations that you've had that have had that keyword in it. So really great. Once we get a good database information going on inside your internal organization, you'll be able to access that information there. Obviously, once we jump into this Teams here, you'll have different options up here where you can actually go to the product roadmap. You can look at all the files that have been collaborated, as well as wikis, things like that. Other things you can do in the search bar here with that / feature is be able to select availability. So that changes our meeting status over here. We went from busy to available, so you can do those quick shortcuts there. So this will be able to assign yourself as different modes. So right now I'm in the middle of a presentation. I have myself set as do not disturb. That means I'm not going to get anything inside my Teams area here. And then what's also great is setting a status meeting. So with this, going out to lunch, you're going to be at your lunch for an hour. You want everybody to know that. Go and select done. Now when anybody goes to chat you inside of Teams here, it's going to show at the bottom, out to lunch for the hour. We'll be back to be able to answer those questions. If you ever have anything saved, messages that are very important, documents that you're looking at accessing all the time, that'll be in this area here. Settings, be able to have some customization of this. So go into dark mode if you want. I know a lot of people in the IT field use everything in dark mode. From there, you can always select your languages, again, if you're dealing with international stuff like that. Obviously, your notifications, if you don't want banners and emails, cut down those distractions. You can organize everything and customize it here. Keyboard shortcuts, great little area. If you do start to memorize some of these to get to places quickly, you can also access that with the / keys. And that is going to pop this up as well inside of here. So you'll be able to cut through Teams, go through things quickly. And I know we are approaching the top of the hour here. So we went through this pretty quickly. Just a high-level overview of all the features. Again, all your calling, everything like that, that's going to be going on in here. If we did start a meeting, the features that we went over in the PowerPoint would pop up. So you would have that large gallery view, everything like that. And I know there were some questions in the chat. You can grant guest access into Teams. You can also send out meetings invites externally. There is a license option as well to provide a dial-in phone number for that. And so if anything like that does come up, go ahead and reach out to the folks at Northwest.
Awesome. Thanks, Joseph. Super great. Sorry for cutting your time short. I talked too much, I think.
No worries. I was like, I was just doing the basics. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, definitely let us know. And we'll be able to handle them.
I love it. Thanks so much. Yes. And Just kind of high level, two takeaways that I really like what you mentioned was first, kind of the out of office or when you're in a meeting. So I think that's what's super cool is in Teams. I'll see, if somebody is in a meeting, it will show them as, red. If they're available, it'll show them as green. If they've been idle, it'll show them as yellow. So I'll know, I get a pulse of like, hey, who's available, who's not available. I need it if it's something urgent, right? I might not message them because I know they're in a meeting or I know they've been idle or they're away. So that has been super cool just to keep a pulse on your team. And then the away messages and stuff like that is also super important for the ability to see who's available. And especially if you're remote and you have people remote, getting a pulse on your team and knowing who's available, who's not available is super helpful. And just to kind of have that synergy of being like, okay, everyone's in the office today, right? And to have that is super cool. And the second thing you mentioned was the searching features. I think those are super awesome. Things that are underutilized in Teams is the ability to search for different things and the ability to find different areas of Teams that like the shortcuts or stuff like that. So those I've noticed have only gotten a lot better and the ability for that. Awesome. So I know there's a couple more questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all your questions today. If you do need more help, I'm going to kind of show you how you can reach out to us and we can answer those questions for you and get you more help. Getting more help with Teams, this is a great graph describing kind of all the different plans that are available for Microsoft 365 and Microsoft and Office 365. You'll also notice there's some terminology difference right here. You'll see that there's Office 365 and Microsoft 365. Microsoft has made things even yet a little more confusing by kind of rebranding their Office 365 environment and calling it Microsoft 365. They're pushing away from Office 365 and kind of bundling it all into Microsoft 365. And what they're adding is actually a bunch of cool stuff. They're adding more security features. They're adding more endpoint management. So if you want management of having the ability to remote manage your end users and stuff like that, the Microsoft 365 world is going to have more of those, and also everything of the Office 365. But they're kind of going away from the 360 over the next couple of years. I imagine they're going to kind of go away completely of the 365 Office 365 world, and it will all be called Microsoft 365, and then have all of those additional features. Their end goal is to help you manage your entire environment, your entire technology environment, so that the hardware, the software, everything. Whereas Office was just, Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, stuff like that, Teams. They have all these other features that they're trying to combine, which we actually think will be a great end product, and we're liking what's coming out of it. But nevertheless, if you need help navigating which licenses you need, kind of that first step would be to get a Microsoft Reseller representative. You can go to nwtext.com/Microsoft Reseller if you don't already have one. It's a free program, like I mentioned. Here are the next steps for kind of the timeline for if you are looking to get more help, and kind of how long will it take us for us to become your reseller. Once again, it is free. The idea behind it is we can help you navigate your licenses and which licenses to purchase. And then if you need additional help on that, we have IT services that can help you manage your entire infrastructure, including Microsoft 365. Fantastic, folks. I know we're right above the hour. Thanks, Joe, so much for joining me today. Thanks for everyone for being there. Thanks for all the questions in advance and throughout the webinar. It was really great, all your guys' participation. If you have more questions, please feel free to reach out. You can also send an email to hello@nwtext.com. That email will get forwarded to my department, and we can help you navigate any specific questions. So everyone, be safe, be well. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.